Hello, everyone, and welcome to our exclusive FTT Big Question Debate at FTT Virtual Nordics. So we have a really great set of debaters here for you today, and we've got a really great question for all of you. And before I start, I'll give our audience a little bit of a background of how we came up with our big question for the Nordics. When you talk about fintech and innovation and startups in the region, and you talk to anyone around the world, they come up with words like progressive, innovative. Big names have come out of the region: Spotify, Klarna, Holvi, iZettle. But when you have conversations from people inside the region, they talk about being conservative and there's a lack of capital for startups. And I kind of thought to myself, why is there this disconnect? Where is the reality? Is this idea that Scandinavia and the Nordics are progressive and innovative kind of a myth or PR? So I thought, why don't we have a bit of a cheeky question? So we've got three great leaders from the region here to talk to you today. So we've got Kathy Chang, who is head of fintech partnerships at DNB. We've got Søren Andersen, chief digital officer at Danske Bank, and Johan Lindgren, digitalization and innovation at Handelsbanken. So each of our debaters are going to get time on stage to answer this question. And afterwards, they're going to have a bit of a discussion. And at the end, we're going to put up a poll, which you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can vote on who you think gave the best answer. So Søren, you are up first in the dock. Please answer the question: is Nordic innovation a myth?
Thank you very much, Liz. No, I don't think it's a myth. You already mentioned Spotify coming out of region. I think we made a lot of other products which are really showing how innovative the region is. We had Skype coming up out of this region, which was, I think, very groundbreaking for communication and which is benefiting us today. We've grown some of the global leaders within their industries, very innovative companies like Lego. Who would have thought that bricks could get so popular and keep our kids entertained for hours and hours? We have the world's largest shipping company, Maersk, growing out of Scandinavia as well. Now growing even more by using technology such as blockchain, and is now one of the leading companies in applying blockchain for something actually useful. I think within the financial service industry, we've shown as well that Scandinavia is very innovative. You mentioned iZettle and Klarna has grown out of Scandinavia as well, and are now recognized as very innovative within the field. But I think it's not something new within the Nordics and the financial service industry. I was born in 1983, which was the same time that a plastic debit card was launched in Denmark. So I've grown up with plastic cards all my life, and have not been used to using cash a lot. And in fact, I never handled a check in my life. And I think it just goes to show how innovative Scandinavia is, and how we are actually first movers also in the financial services industry. And it is probably surprising to many, because it's fairly small countries. Our population size are in a global scale very small. We're 6 million people in Denmark, a little bit more in Sweden, a little less in Norway, and even less in Finland. But we're still seeing these products and innovation and companies growing out of Scandinavia, which I think is very impressive for this region. And even every year in Sweden, Johan, close to your home, we are celebrating the great innovators of the world every year with the Nobel Prize. So I think there is a lot of innovation that is centered around Scandinavia, and I'm very proud of that as well. And reflecting on it, I think there's three main reasons. I think the social welfare state we have in Scandinavia is very much motivating people to take chances and actually risk a bit of themselves. They know that their kids will go to college, and they'll also be able to retire safely. So I think that's one reason why we're seeing a lot of people actually innovating here. I think also, and I've seen that working with innovation in Scandinavia, that people here are trusting in authorities. So when we launched the solution, the natural response to that innovation is actually that they want to try it out and trust what the bank has launched or whatever, or what the state has launched. So they have a very well-built trust in society through years and the structures of society. And I don't get the same response in many other regions where the first response to innovation may be a degree of distrust and let's see others use it before we actually try it. And I think within the financial service industry, we have a very good history of collaboration. All of these schemes I mentioned, checks are not being used here anymore. We had plastic cards, and now we're also building a new payments infrastructure together across the countries in a collaboration called P27. And I think all of these innovations are actually being enabled within the industry because the banks are able to work together for the benefit of the customers and of course also lowering our costs across. It all sounds very great, but I don't think everything is perfect. We are small countries with tiny populations, and I do see that it's hard for startups to attract, especially venture capital. Taxes are fairly high here as well, and of course that can be a little bit demotivating with a high tax rate in order to actually risk things and make an effort. And then of course our market areas are very small. So as companies grow, they will also start looking at other market areas, and maybe some of them feel that they are kind of outgrowing Scandinavia. So I also do see companies that are refocusing their attention outside of Scandinavia simply because they are much bigger markets, either in the US or other places in Europe or Asia. So I think all in all, I think we can be proud of what is being done in Scandinavia, and of course we have our challenges as well.
Excellent, Søren. You've got that's right on time. Perfect. Well done. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Kathy now. You've got 7 minutes to answer the question: is Nordic innovation a myth? Oh, I think you're on mute. It's 2020. That's the quote of the year. Go again, yeah. Kathy.
Yes. Thank you, Liz. And I think I have a little bit interesting background to talk about this topic. I'm from Taiwan. Before coming to the Nordics, I was working in Southeast Asia, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Philippines. In now one of the biggest e-commerce platform called Shopee. And my job there is to work with fintechs to build up the payment infrastructure in these countries so that our customers, the e-commerce customer who wants to buy stuff from our site, can finally pay. And there, as compared to now in Norway, the end customers have we have a very different, so to speak, challenge. It's in the Nordic, when you buy things online, when you check out, it's a question of which payment options you feel like using at that time. So maybe it's credit cards, your debit card, maybe it's bank transfer, or maybe it's invoice. You don't want to pay as now. But then in some of the countries in Southeast Asia, actually the question is, there's no way that they can pay if you don't build a certain payment infrastructure. For instance, in some countries, more than 80% of the people don't have a bank account yet, or so they don't have a credit card, debit card. So how do you pay? Then innovation there in those fintechs fields is to build a solution where people can still shop online when they don't have a bank account. The solution is, for instance, we work with convenience stores. So when people shop online, the final step at their checkout, they get a QR code or a serial number. They bring those QR code to the convenience store next to their house. They show it to the staff. They pay in cash. So it's shop online, pay in cash. That's the innovation in Southeast Asia, maybe more about financial inclusion and digitalization. So when I moved to Norway a couple years ago, as now in DNB, one of the largest bank in Norway, it's a different world. So for instance, I moved here, I also need to open a bank account. It's totally paperless. I never sign anything physical. And because I'm new to the country, I have to visit a branch, and it's just not so many branch because everything has been digitalized. And when I'm at the branch, there's very few people in there. And at a later stage, I also bought a house and need to apply for a mortgage loan. And the whole process is digital as well, no paper whatsoever. And the reason behind it is all the data has been digitalized. So the bank fetch your salaries from the government and fetch the value of your house from a central data place. So I think for maybe a lot of bank elsewhere, innovation is about digitalization, and this, like for instance, this mortgage digitalization can be a big project of their innovation. But Nordic's innovation is no longer that. It's building upon these digitalization outcome. So sometimes it's not so obvious because everything is digital. Then what is the next innovation we can do? Maybe it's automation. Maybe it's giving better insights to the customer. It's AI. It's providing even faster, more convenient, even better user experience of our product. So I think almost every bank in the Nordic I know have a team like ours, strategic partnership team, and also a corporate venture investment arm who's working tirelessly on startups and fintech in these regions. I don't think Nordic innovation is a myth. It's maybe that the Nordic banks has achieved to a state where everything is digitalized. So the next innovation could be not as obvious as compared to some other parts of the world. Yeah.
Excellent. Perfect. Lovely. Everyone's doing the same amount of time. This is excellent. So we're going, I'm going to move over to Johan now, and it's your turn to answer the question. Is Nordic innovation a myth?
Sure. Thank you, Liz. I think I'm probably going to repeat quite a bit of what Soren and Kathy has already talked about, because I think it's less a question of whether or not innovation is a myth and more a question of how different the Nordic markets are as compared to others. So I'm obviously speaking from a context of kind of financial services, fintech, coming from a Swedish bank. And I mean, it's, I think kind of also coming from Sweden, I do realize that the Nordic, especially fintech scene and perhaps Swedish fintech scene, is quite a bit different. And I'm not just saying that to pat myself or my colleagues here on the back. I think if you look at quite a lot of charts over what areas fintech is populating, what types of product comes out of fintech, in other markets you see things like KYC, digital onboarding, authentication being like hotspots for areas where fintech is needed. And I mean, because of the trust that Soren mentioned and the kind of the already begun digitalization process that Kathy mentioned, I think coming from there, you kind of realize that these huge problems that other markets have had aren't still problems in the Nordics, and especially in Sweden. I mean, we've had tools like Bank ID, which is a national digital authentication tool for the past, I think, 8 years. We've had Swish, which is a mobile instant payment solution that everyone uses basically for so many years as well. And I think if you look at a lot of other markets, those are the types of products that fintech put out. But in Sweden particularly, I mean, those are the kind of brainchilds of incumbent banks. The incumbent banks have been the one to kind of build that digital infrastructure on which in so many other countries, fintech are now kind of innovating upon. So, I mean, we have this basic infrastructure that I think personally is hugely important. And I think also kind of why that has been a successful case in the Swedish market is because of the trust that Søren mentioned. I mean, I think the Nordic region has the highest levels of social trust in the world. And I mean, talking from one perspective, that's great on a personal level, being able to trust a fintech company, or being able to trust a bank, but it also kind of affects how banks work together. So both Bank ID and Swish, I mean, those are the product of multiple incumbent banks stepping together to create that infrastructure. And I think that's possible because, I mean, individuals within these large companies, they trust each other, and they trust that, you know, working together as banks is an option, basically. And I think that's very different from how other markets operate. And I mean, it's one thing to say that historically, but I think that's true even today. I mean, Søren mentioned P27 in Sweden. The incumbent banks have a KYC initiative called IDEM. There's a whole lot of things going on here still today that kind of tells the story of trust being a factor in enabling the kind of infrastructural innovation that other markets perhaps haven't seen yet. So fintech is something else in the Nordics, I think. So and I think the history of having incumbent banks building that infrastructure has also affected how fintech kind of works today. And I think the type of fintech companies we see in Nordic are very different from other markets. We do see, you know, companies. I think abroad, a lot more fintech companies are building ecosystems, which is the natural approach. You know, when you build a kind of an infrastructural product, it's natural to build an ecosystem upon that. But because the kind of Nordics have this approach where incumbents have built that infrastructure, I think fintech is focusing quite a bit more on features, and features tend to spawn this kind of hype or this vision that every bank should have all the features. And in all honesty, I think that kind of dampens innovation. That creates this market where it's profitable to market yourself as an incumbent as innovative through these kind of very feature-based partnerships, rather than a partnership model that I promote, which is a lot more about innovation, kind of a general innovation partnership with a startup or a scale-up. And I mean, although Handelsbanken, where I come from, has been kind of conservative on a historical level, I think we're quite early on to kind of adopt to that model where it's more about and building a joint venture through an innovation partnership rather than just buying a feature from a fintech company. And I think, you know, looking ahead at kind of the Nordic markets and the global markets as well, I see a need for a lot more differentiation in banking. And I think that differentiation, you know, comes from partly, of course, products being more commoditized, but also because we have kind of now this basic infrastructure on which we all need to innovate upon. And that's where I think differentiation comes in. And personally, I mean, I'm very excited to see how kind of innovation can be built from incumbents and startups being a lot more involved in kind of finding a joint culture and finding joint customers and kind of building things for them rather than for the marketing purposes that I think the Nordic markets has been a lot more about lately.
Excellent. Well done. You've all had your time on the floor. I mean, I've got a few questions for some of you. I know all of you have mentioned infrastructure, and that's a question I want to ask all of you. But I wanted to go back to something that Søren mentioned. You know, when you talked about innovation in the region, you mentioned Spotify, you mentioned Lego, you mentioned the Nobel Prize. These are all, you know, globally known brands, you know, organizations, but not in our, you know, in our fintech world, not necessarily fintech products. Do you think maybe that's where a little bit of some of the internal frustration comes from? Like, where is the fintech Spotify? Is that like, you know, that this region should produce something like that, or do I like, I'm just, I wonder if you maybe wanted to comment on that.
Well, I think it's back to some of what Johan said as well, that a lot of innovation here actually happened with the incumbents in a collaboration. I think very much the banks in Scandinavia see themselves as part of society. And we are trying to solve problems in society. And that's what we've always been focused on. And I think if you're looking at the Spotify of Scandinavia, or what has come out of Scandinavia within the financial services industry, I think you need to look at some of the stuff that the financial service industry has done by collaboration between the incumbents. So in Denmark, for instance, we have a national ID scheme where we can log in, which is called NemID. But in Sweden and Norway, we have a similar solution called Bank ID, which was made by the banks in collaboration. The debit card solution that we had in Denmark was built in a collaboration between the banks as well. And I think these schemes are world class and world leading. And I think that is where you need to look at for innovation is actually some of the stuff that is coming out of the incumbent banks. And I can see how that changes the way that fintechs would operate. And as Johan said, then they focus a lot on features. And I think that's what we're seeing as well, that the fintechs that are successful in Scandinavia are actually working with the banks and are using them as a distribution channel. And I think it's working well. And I think really what fintechs need to focus on in order to be successful in Scandinavia is to solve real life problems for users. And then I'm sure the banks will be there to help them distribute widely. And I think we are seeing some of that already now. I think if you look back during the last couple of years or so, I think Scandinavia in particular has been very focused on the issues we have with climate change, sustainability. We've seen lots of investment, not only in Norway and Denmark and Sweden, but all over the globe, of course, into green initiatives. But in particular here, it's been a very big focus. Green mortgages, green bonds. We have done a lot within the financial service industry to actually help solve these issues. And we can see it also across the line in Scandinavia. We have just in Denmark alone, on the top 10 most sustainable companies in the world, we have the number 1 Ørsted, and we also have Christian Hansen there on the top 10. I think that's a problem that we recognize in Scandinavia, and then industries across are working to solve that issue, and also the financial service industry. And who knows, maybe in 3 years' time it'll be something else we're working on. But I definitely think that fintechs have a role to play in these transformations that we are doing.
Yeah, I wanted to move on to Kathy because I had a question. I was writing down little thoughts as you were giving your answer. I really liked that you were bringing in your personal experience, especially, moving to Norway and dealing with banks, not just with your job, but with your personal life. And when you were talking about Norway, already having a lot of data, a lot of functionality being digitized, I wrote down something which kind of said, now what? And I think we all three of you are talking about very much the same thing about building on top of this established infrastructure. So what do you see now in the region while there is this established digital platform infrastructure established in the region, what's next? What do you see innovative that's gonna fix a consumer or business problem moving forward?
No, that's a big question. I guess everyone can agree. So what's next? Yeah, so it's definitely, as I said, it's not it's very different from other parts of the world, but user experience can always be improved. So people are always asking for a faster, more convenient, more trustworthy, a peaceful, give you the peace in mind, the kind of solution. So it can be done in payments, can be done in other kinds of products. And I think also PSD2, open banking, has brought in some new opportunities in banking. But I'm sort of waiting to see not just the bank open up our data so the third party can use it, but also more the other way around. Because I think next innovation can be invisible banking in a way. Like now you are used to a lot of things working in the background, like Google knows your preference. And if banking were to move forward, maybe it's also something similar to that. You don't have to think so much about your finances because they know your preferences. But in order to do that, you have to know more about this person, and maybe the financial activity doesn't tell enough about you. It's more about also elsewhere that it should be integrated. So yeah, maybe in the future the banking will be even more automatic, caters to your preference, invisible in a way. That's the next wave and next innovation, and I think it's happening. People are a lot of banks are trying to figure out what the first step can be, and I think a lot of banks has sort of agreed that a first step could be a personal finance management company that helped that can be integrated into the bank's mobile bank, and then help giving our customer a better insights of their financial status, or even give them options or provide them with like options to choose actions, like maybe we analyze your expenses and we recommend that this month you can save 5,000 kroner. Please push this button. So maybe that's the first step, and there's much more we can do in the future.
Great. So I also had a question for Johan. I mean, you talked a bit about fintech startups building features, and Soren talked a bit about the incumbent banks. Do you think there's like one comment I had from someone from the region said that incumbent banks in Sweden specifically, he mentioned, have trouble partnering with fintechs, which surprised me when he spoke to me about it. Is there kind of a frustration with incumbent banks that those features aren't coming from them, or are they having difficulty partnering with new entrants that are building this? Like, how is that relationship managed?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's. I mean, I can only kind of approach it from my own experiences at Handelsbanken, and I think it's not that banks are frustrated. I think it has more to do with the fact that banks are stuck in a way of doing things, and are stuck in a type of kind of business model that hinders a lot of the type of innovation that I think other markets or other industries in which startups are trying to do things. So banking is a much more kind of holistic model. We've often talked about universal banks kind of doing everything, and I think in order for the banking sector to kind of move forward, we need to see that shift a bit. We need to go from the partnerships, as I said before, being feature based and being more kind of open innovation based. And I also think we need to see startups attempt at kind of disrupting the classic universal banking model. So we were talking earlier about kind of a Spotify of fintech. I think what Spotify did, obviously, was to kind of transform the music industry rather than digitalize it. And I think, banking has kind of moved from being analog to digital and then being digitalized. And now we need to kind of see that transformational piece. And I think the reason, as kind of coming back to your question, I think the reason we haven't kind of seen that huge impact coming from partnerships in Sweden is partly because it has been so feature-based. So I think in order for the partnerships to be truly impactful, we need to kind of have that. We need to have that transformational piece there and make something more happen, and just add another feature in a banking app.
Okay. No, it's interesting. So I've got a final question for all of you, and it was kind of inspired by Kathy's story about moving from Taiwan to Norway, and I myself, I made a joke a few years ago that I moved to the UK from America to take advantage of standing orders and direct debits. So this is kind of a personal question for all of you. think back to pre-pandemic COVID times when I'm sure we all traveled for business and for pleasure, been to other parts of the world, other parts of Europe. When you look at where you live now, not just your job, but your personal life and how you deal with your financial life, is there, when you travel and go to other countries, is there anything that you think, oh, I wish I could do here what I do at home? And the second part of that question is, have you ever seen anything globally where you think, oh, I wish we did that here? So what innovation do you wish you could take with you and travel throughout the world? And what innovation have you seen that you would like to bring back home and see implemented? So I'm gonna go with Soren again and start with you. So those are your two final questions.
Well, I have traveled a bit, and I also lived in the UK for a couple of years, and my wife is from the US, so I have seen the other side a bit, and I think one of the things I miss the most is probably the whole digital ID scheme. The fact that you can log into anywhere and you can just pick up your phone and you can log in and you can authenticate and they know who you are and they trust you and they don't have to do anything more to satisfy themselves with who you are. I really miss that when I'm abroad, no matter where it is. If I have to open an account somewhere and I have to mail in or go to a branch or whatever, or if I need to change something or order something with the government visa or something, I really miss that when I'm abroad. And I think it's really optimizing our society that we have these digital basic building blocks available in our society. The ability to send digital mail safely. You don't have to rely on snail mail. I don't even remember when I got my last snail mail. It's months ago. So I really miss those basic digital components when I travel and when I'm abroad. So then you ask, what would I like to have from abroad in Scandinavia? And I think that's a more interesting question. Unlike Amazon in Denmark, my shopping experience isn't as smooth as when I'm in the US. I do see the benefits of those platforms. I know they've announced that they're launching in Sweden. They'll probably come to Denmark at some point as well. And I know they're not really within the financial service industry, but I think when I look at,
they will be soon.
I know, yeah. They are to some degree, yeah. But I think really we have a very well functioning financial service industry here. Low mortgage, low interest rates on mortgages, probably the lowest in the world, I would think. Everything just works whenever you pay. You can use your cards everywhere. So there's not anything really within the financial service industry where I would say, as a retail client, as a personal customer, that I feel I'm lacking compared to other countries. On the contrary.
Excellent. So Johan, I'm gonna move to you next, and we'll have Kathy finish us off. So which innovation do you want to export, and which would you wish to import into your country?
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to agree with Søren that the kind of national ID thing, being on a global scale, that would be a game changer. And I think that would also be a game changer in terms of enabling startups to kind of move across borders, enabling products to move across borders. So that's definitely something that I'm looking forward to. And in terms of bringing in something from abroad, whenever I go to a place like Southeast Asia or San Francisco or LA, I think there's an openness there to approaching new things, and that's hasn't really come across that well in the Nordics. I think the Nordics are quite archaic when it comes to kind of being open to entirely new business model, or being open to hop in someone's car to grab a ride. So that's that kind of sense of openness and being being open to trying new things is something I personally think we need a bit more of here in the Nordics.
See, this was the kind of what prompted this question is you spent the entire panel talking about how innovative the region was, and now you're talking about how people want to open to new things. But this is the interesting conversation about how people see themselves. So we're gonna round this up with Kathy. Kathy, what would you import and what would you export in terms of innovation? Oh, Kathy, you're muted again. That's okay.
Sorry, wanted to make sure that I don't make any sound. But yeah, I have to agree very much with Søren and Johan on the bank ID and the rest of the thing they say. Just maybe for me, it's very personal, and I think I would like to import to the Nordics, or maybe I cannot say for Sweden and Denmark, but into Norway is the loyalty scheme that is a bit more popular and grand in Southeast Asia and in Taiwan. That is a kind of when I live in Southeast Asia and in Taiwan, when you use a credit card from the banks, there's always a lot of things you can do after you use it. So you accumulate enough points. You can check every month, like what can you redeem, like 5 points for a bottle or a bottle of wine, or for a movie ticket. So that really it creates a stickiness and loyalty of your customer who wants to keep using your card. Oh, I know we have certain scheme in Nordics in Norway, but it's not as popular. And also, I feel that the banks are more humbled. You don't see the banks everywhere, whereas in Southeast Asia and Taiwan, when you go to a shopping mall, there will be a catalog, and maybe at the back of it, there's like 10 different banks promoting using their card because you get certain benefits or discount right when you make a purchase. It's a bit more low key here, more humble, which is I think it's a Scandinavian way of very very humble and not showing a lot. But I think the loyalty program, if it's built well, it benefits the merchants, the society, the economy, and the bank. Something I would like to import.
Excellent. And export as well.
The bank ID thing, it's very genius.
Yes, I mean, I'm really glad that you all kind of mentioned that, because for all of you watching, please stay on the main stage, because our next panel is going to be looking at identity, Nordic rules, and beyond. So we'll have a great discussion about that further. But I want to thank our debaters right now. Please vote in the poll on who you think answered the question. I think we have innovation as a reality in the Nordics, and we had 3 viewpoints. The winner of the debate gets Twitter and LinkedIn kudos as their prize for the winner. But I want to thank Kathy, Søren, and Johan. Thank you very much, and we look forward to the rest of the day. Cheers.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Thank you.